Well, I feel like you guys should all get badges or certificates for being here after 10 hours and 15 minutes of meetings. My brief back to when I write the summary of this meeting is that, there's the people that attend these UN water meetings are apparently very hardcore, and they don't even need pizza or wine in order to be at a meeting this late, which usually you have to do for where I'm from to get people to attend. My name's Jason Morrison. I am actually employed by a small NGO called the Pacific Institute. It's a policy think tank based in California. I'm here in my capacity as the technical director of the UN Sea Water Mandate, which I'm going to talk quite a bit about today. In fact, my presentation is in two parts. I'm assuming that many people here will not be aware or familiar with the Sea Water Mandate. So the first slides will be covering the initiative or describing it. And then the second portion of the presentation will be about a platform. If it goes out, I'm going to ask you to touch it because I've seen you get shocked every time we turn this thing back on. We launched it as a beta version in Stockholm World Water Week in August, and I'm going to show you slides that are screenshots of the platform, but it is operational right now. It's online. Had we a broadband and fast connection, I could do a walkthrough on the actual platform itself. So the Sea Water Mandate. Oh, one thing before I get into this. Many of the points I would like to make about why the private sector is increasingly caring about water issues and why they're engaging with others around water, I'm actually going to talk about in the session tomorrow that we have, focusing on collaboration and companies. So today I'm really going to talk about the initiative itself, not this new motivation and why some of the companies are beginning to think about water a different way. But for the Sea Water Mandate, Kofi Annan launched the initiative in 2007. It's part of the UN Global Compact, which in Rio had its 10-year anniversary. The Global Compact was created by Kofi Annan as well, and serves as the interface between the private sector and the UN on a range of issues. There's about 7,000 companies in the Global Compact, and when companies join, they subscribe to 11 principles that are broadly applicable, from labor to environment, and then they report annually on their progress against implementing those principles. The Sea Water Mandate is a sub-initiative of the Global Compact, started 5 years ago now, focusing on water. The Pacific Institute is part of the Secretariat with the Global Compact in helping to support the initiative. While officially companies endorse the platform or endorse the initiative, almost all of the work and all of the meetings that have been held under the auspices of the Sea Water Mandate have been multi-stakeholder. Just wait. Yeah, I'm sure you have an interest in just me being patient here. All of the meetings themselves are multi-stakeholder facilitated dialogues, and actually the work that's being done in the work streams is carried out in collaboration with other NGOs or UN agencies or other interests in a very collaborative way. So you might say that collaboration or multi-stakeholder collaboration is pretty much in the DNA of this initiative. The initiative is both a strategic framework, and I'm going to come back to that, as well as a call to action. The sense was not that a small number of companies would do really great innovative things around water, but also that this platform could be a way of trying to encourage other businesses to think more sustainably about their water footprint and to manage it in a better way. Companies that endorse the Sea Water Mandate, this is the core document that lays out the commitment areas. These are the 6 commitment areas that companies annually report against. And you can see that only the first 1.5 are really about the company's direct and indirect water use. That is their direct operations, and then their supply chain and what they do to work within their supply chain around water. All the rest of it is really inherently about external engagement, whether they're engaging communities, fence line communities, or in watershed management issues, or working collectively with civil society groups. So as you can see from the commitments that are made here, many of them are founded on the issue, on the notion of collaboration and working with others. In fact, one of them is collective action, and you could argue that's conceptually overlapping a number of the other ones. It is a multi-industry sector initiative. There are almost 100 companies in it from a range of business sectors. Many of the initial companies were food and beverage, but the industry sector representation has diversified quite a bit over the last 5 years. There are 3 major work streams. I'm only going to talk about policy engagement and collective action, but we also have done quite a bit of work on the issue of the human right to water and sanitation and what it means for companies to respect that right in practice. We're developing some good practice guidelines along in that area. And there's also a work stream on corporate water disclosure. It's generally a space that's underdeveloped, and a sense that if there were better information being provided about companies about what they're doing around water, that many would benefit from that. So now I shift gears to the Water Action Hub. It is, I would suggest, quite an appropriate platform for this idea of 2013 being the year of collaboration. And as I mentioned before about how many of the projects are done in collaboration with others, you'll see that project partners in this project include the International Business Leaders Forum, Deloitte, that made a sizable in-kind contribution, GIZ, and the UN Global Compact. So what is the Water Action Hub? It's an information platform that's meant to enable organizations to find out who they can work with on a common issue of strategic interest. Okay? And all it does is try to do that through information sets that are interlinked and that will allow this to happen very efficiently. The idea here is that the organizations that use the platform get to identify their priorities, and this system allows them to link up with others that have a shared priority. Now, you only collectively work with them if these led to the achievement of your organization's broader water-related objectives. This, I don't know, this one's a little hard to see. This is the landing page of the platform. And I'm going to walk through a number of different elements of what's here. The top right corner is a scrolling feed that gives updates when there's projects or organizations that have joined the platform. The main way that people navigate the site is through these 4 content areas: organizations, projects, geographic region, or action area. My thinking is that many of the users of the hub go through action area, and I'm going to start there. But it could be that an organization that maybe isn't a global player, that is only working in, let's say, a river basin in southern Africa, would just want to work in that basin and would immediately go to that basin as opposed to some issue area, because they don't have any bandwidth or interest in working with others in other parts of the world. This cluster map is, you may have seen on other websites. If you scroll over one of these and click it, it will take you to the next layer of map until you finally get to the projects that have been placed within there, but I'll come to that. If you were to have clicked action areas, it would have brought you to this landing page. And you'll see here that we've identified 12 action areas. Now, there's a number of ways you could think about action areas. They, in themselves, can be objectives or outcomes where you want to work towards. So, for example, we talked a lot today earlier around climate change being, quote unquote, a game changer. And there is an action area around climate change adaptation and resilience. The idea here would be that if there's an organization, let's say a company that has decided or done its risk assessment and realized that it's operating in parts of the world where the public authorities are not giving sufficient attention to climate change and are not dialoguing and planning accordingly, then This would be a way that the company could actually click on that or register its interest in working with others in that area on that topic and find quickly other organizations, whether they be civil society groups or local authorities or other companies that share that interest, that want to work on that topic. Now, we recognize that these topics are not mutually exclusive of one another. They overlap, and that's from our perspective, that's no problem. If a project or a collective action activity is scoped so that it actually hits 3 of these, then users of the platform are asked to tag the project with 3 or 4 or 5. So that all we care about is that if someone's interested in that action area, our algorithms will search it and find that for them. If you were to click one of those action areas, efficient water use in this case, this is the screen you would be taken to. And on the left-hand side of this column, you have the river basins currently that have projects in them that have been tagged with this action area. So these are efforts that are underway that are tackling this issue. These are the organizations in the hub so far that have clicked this action area as something that they want to work with others on. And these are the projects that have been tagged associated with that action area. So if you were to click on this project, that hyperlink would bring you to the project profile, which I believe is my next slide. Well, first is the organizational profile. So when a company joins or when an organization joins the platform, they fill in a little bit of information about themselves, a 1-paragraph synopsis of what the organization does, the action areas that it wants to work with others regardless of geographic region. So these are key thematics that they want to work with large players. So a water aid, for example, would click for a global interest in WASH-related community level projects. It also will list the projects that are in the hub that are associated with this organization and the basins that it's operating. In this area is quick information, hyperlink to the organization's website. Many people here will know SAB Miller, but if it's a small NGO that's working on the Colorado River, being able to link to their website and learn a little bit more about them is a pretty important piece of information so you can decide whether you want to reach out to them, work with them. You'll see here that also that the organizational contact, in this case David Grant, has chosen his privacy settings so that his email and phone number isn't in there. In which case, if you want to contact that person, that says contact the person. There's an internal messaging system that allows you to say, I want to talk to you about what you're doing in this country or in this river basin. And then they can work through an internal messaging system rather than email. This is another example of an organizational profile. I won't spend as much time. Sasol is an energy and chemical company based in Southern Africa. You can see that they've used different action areas that they're interested in, and that Andres here didn't blind his info. If you were to have clicked on one of the hyperlinks that was a project, this is an example of what would come up. So in this case, you have a SAB Miller project that it gives you a 1-paragraph synopsis of the scope of the project, maybe where it is, what it's achieved so far, or what it aims to achieve, the action areas that the hub user has attached to it. So this is what, in this case, this one is community level access to safe water sanitation. So community level WASH project, ecosystem or source water restoration or protection, and improved water governance and policy development. So that's what this particular work is focusing on. These are the project partners that are associated also with the project, and this is where it's located on a map. Although some of the stuff that's happening on farm, for example, it's pretty hard to do a latitude, longitude type of designation to a project. We don't really care. The idea is that generally you understand where this thing has landed. This project profile is a little bit different. This is focusing on efficiency. This is, again, Sasol and work that they've done with a local municipality to stop leakage in the system. They're co-financing the effort, and then there's agreements about how water saved will be used to improve access for marginalized or vulnerable communities. River basins, we feel that ultimately, most stakeholders will want to land their collective action in a particular geography. Only the big players will want to actually work globally and maybe develop partnerships in multiple regions. So the idea, a central concept behind this platform is to try to land as many of these in particular basins where there's an interest already in collective action or collaboration around water. We started in the beta version with 3 basins. Next week we'll add 3 more. I would predict that by the end of 2013 we'll probably add a dozen at least more. And what that means, any organization could input a project based in a basin outside of one of these. But what happens when we add a basin to the platform is that we create what's called a basin profile. And this is where we actually bring in a lot of information that's associated already with the basin planning. These would be, and I have some slides on what these entail, but these would be planning documents that the local and regional authorities have already produced. They show the policy direction for that basin. In this corner, what you have here is an indication of what at least the hub users have indicated that they think are the priority challenges for the basin. So if I've entered myself as being interested in the Orange Senku, then when I am putting in my information for the Orange Senku, a pop-up box asks me to identify what do I think are the primary challenges. And so I enter those. What this does is an algorithm that amalgamates all the entries to date. So what it tells you at least is, for the purposes of the platform, what other users of the platform think are the priority water challenges. Whether or not they want to work with you on solving them or not, this gives you a pulse. So what you can see is for this basin, the top getters are local water resource governance, physical water supply, down to water, what does that say, demand and competition among users. So those would be the top 3 that they released. These are the organizations that are interested in working collectively in this basin. If you were to click that second tab, this is where we lay out who are the basin authorities, because not all the, like for instance, a company that, let's say, Unilever, that wants to start doing more collective action in this particular area may not be aware of the different planning documents that are there or the authorities that they might want to reach out to on particular topics. These are the planning documents. We decided not to try to house all these documents on the platform. These are just hyperlinks that take you to the place where they're actually housed by the basin authority or otherwise. And I only have 2 more slides. There was a recognition that we didn't want to create this platform in a vacuum. There are other online platforms that are oriented around matchmaking. That's what they do. And we have, to different levels of maturity, reached out to some of those platforms because we want to automate the link. So some people may be familiar with ACVO or BPN, the Blue Planet Network, where they actually already have mapping functions for WASH-related projects, for example. And so we've worked with them to automate the way that those projects could be imported into our platform. And the color coding of the flags on the map are color-coded according to which platform it comes from. So that when people click on the project, it would take them back to that project, to that platform. Some of you may be familiar with the WWF/DEG water risk filter. This is an analytical tool that allows people, users, to characterize the nature of the water challenge in a particular area. The idea is that once a user of that tool has figured out what they think are the key risks or issues that they want to address, there are hyperlinks that bring them over to the hub, because if addressing that risk involves collaboration and collective action with others, if you realize it necessitates that, then this is where you can begin to find others that might care about the same issue. Okay, I'll stop with that. And that was my last slide. So as I mentioned, it is operational. You could log on to or just visit the platform right now. If you were to just start surfing it without having registered, it would give you the first layer of information. But once you get to wanting to click on organizational profiles or project profiles, it will ask you to register for the site, which involves pretty much putting in your email address and basic information, and then you can do it. So it's pretty much open source. But what we really wanted to try to do is get people to actually register for the platform and share their information so that we don't have a bunch of organizations that are just interested in gleaning this information, but only those that are really interested in potentially working with others on water issues. So the last point I'll make before, I'd be happy to take questions or get feedback if anyone thinks that we've gone horribly wrong with this and we're missing some opportunity. The point that I'll make is that many of the organizations that have already entered projects, and I think we have about 65 projects now, which actually exceeded our expectations for where we thought we would be by now. Many of those that have entered are either smaller organizations or companies that tend to just move fast, make quick decisions, and they get their stuff in there. But we've been in quite a few conversations with some of what I call the bigger players in the water sector. Sorry, Karen, for using that term, but there are a lot of people, the known names, the water aides, where we've had a lot of bilateral conversations to try to tease out what's strategic in terms of how to use this. Because just entering all the information about all the projects you have going around the world is a burdensome task. It may not be the most strategic way. And all I'll say is that those organizations we've had conversations with, we've had a range of what's emerging are a range of ways that companies are going to, these organizations are going to start using it in a strategic way, and then based on what value they derive out of it, they may upscale it or tack to a different direction. So if there's at least a preliminary interest in using this platform to advance your organization's mission and objectives, then we would welcome a conversation about how what would be strategic about where to start with this, whether a particular geography or certain projects that you might want to try to profile and get others involved in. Because these projects that are entered are in different levels of maturity. Some are just prospectively organizations that want to work in an action area, but they haven't actually got anything happening yet, so they want to figure out who they can work with to move it forward, versus a project that's 3 years into it and actually has some outcomes already associated with it. So let me stop there and see if there are any questions or comments. I understand that the buses won't be here until 8 anyways, so it's not like not asking questions is going to get you to the wine reception faster.
Well, Ramon Llamas, I have a question. About 1 year ago, there was in Madrid a meeting speaking about this platform. And, well, I was there, but I think then I look at the list of the corporation in Spain, 1,200 names. I think I don't know really any of them is doing anything in Spain. Do you have any idea?
In the Seawater mandate, there are
1,200 names of corporations that theoretically they were in the water mandate. They support that.
Yes.
In Spain. Yeah.
And so I guess the answer to the questions got multiple layers. There are some Spanish headquartered companies in the mandate. There are, I think, 2 or 3 that fall into that category. But many of the companies in the mandate have operations, direct operations in Spain and parts of the world, around the world. And perhaps more interestingly, they have supply chain almost everywhere. And so one of the things that we've come to realize about trying to get action happening and collaboration happening is that when you talk to a company, let's say Nike, one of our endorsers, if you were to try to do a global search of where Nike has operations, it's very hard to find, right? But if you talk to the Nike people and they say, well, yeah, actually, we source our garment manufacturer in these 16 countries, and we know we're sourcing cotton from these countries, that's information that's pretty, it's not readily available to everybody. So what we found is very interesting is when you put a call out to the mandate endorsing companies and say, who wants to do collective action in the Mekong, for example. And we did this with UNEP through a partnership with Maite, who's in the back of the room. And ultimately, we just started with the 4 apparel companies, Levi's, H&M, Levi's, sorry, did I say Levi's already? Nike and VF. Nautica is the brand that was interested in doing it. But at that time, Inditex hadn't joined. And immediately we find that they've got operations all throughout the Mekong. And then once we start talking about what we've been doing in this collective action, many of the other companies, beverage companies and chemical companies that have operations or suppliers in either Laos or in Vietnam said, we would like to get involved in this too. And when we had one of our technical workshops, training workshops around water efficiency and improvement in, I think it was in Vietnam, in Ho Chi Minh City, one of the environmental ministers who attended the meeting said, how did you get 50 companies into the room? This is kind of amazing. I've not seen this many garment companies in the room. And the answer to that was, when Nike and Levi's and H&M and Nautica send letters to their supply chain saying there's an event here we think you might want to go to, they respond to that. So I guess what I'm trying to get at is the opportunity, even though there's only 100 companies, and whether or not they're Spanish headquartered companies or wherever they're headquartered, the business relations that they have in their supply chain spread well beyond what most people would appreciate. And so the opportunity to get collective action going in a place like, let's say, East Africa or Southern Africa, there's a huge opportunity there that's untapped right now. Many of the companies, this platform was proposed by a gentleman from SAB Miller, who was on a panel at a London conference talking about corporate water stewardship. And on that same panel, and in that panel, in his presentation, he was talking about how he had just been engaging the government in Ghana about long-term water concerns that they have and the need to do better long-term water planning. And on that same panel, there was somebody from Cadbury who said the same thing about how they were working with the Ghanaian government on water-related issues. And they were in a panel in London, and they had no idea that that conversation was happening. So there's this paucity of information connecting what people are already doing. So the value proposition of the Water Action Hub is an intermediate step. We realize that partnership and collaboration takes a ton of time, and there's all the warts and stuff that you got to figure out about whether you want to work with people really on the ground. And that won't happen in this platform. But there's an intermediate step of information transfer, and what you want there is a very efficient way for people to do a quick scan to see who's working where, what do they want to work on, and let's start having a conversation about that. And we think this can deliver that intermediate step. But I know I didn't answer your question, but I did the politician thing of answering the question I wish you had asked me.
Hi, thank you for your presentation. I think it could be a really powerful tool, and I was wondering what you were thinking about doing with this project, when they will be done. And I think it could be really useful by having some kind of lesson learned in each of your projects. And for example, tomorrow I want to work on the Zambezi Basin, and I want to have an idea of what kind of project has been done, what kind of difficulties the stakeholders already faced, and maybe adding kind of best practices or lessons learned of the projects by itself may help as well with the future project that will be implemented in this basin.
Yeah, no, that's a great, we've talked about this, and here's the tension we need to grapple with. I totally agree that being able to account for what the on-the-ground impacts were and to show how projects actually led to tangible outcomes that were beneficial is very important for this thing over the long term for its viability. The tension we have is that, and I won't name names, but from our companies that have been very close to this project and have been very good at giving feedback on what would be helpful. And the analogy that's used is you can think of this as a dating site, right? This is a matchmaking site around collective action on water. When you have a Match.com, what you don't ask, when two people meet on Match.com, what you don't ask them to do is then send back a report on, how did the first date go, and then, what happened, on your third date, and you just let people kind of, they make their match and they go and do what they want to do. There's a lot of nervousness that if, in order to use the platform, there's this burdensome reporting protocol about what happened to make it worthwhile that they then are subscribing to by using it. At least from a company perspective, there was a lot of hesitant looks from like, okay, we don't want to have this be. So is to have the project team do these analytics to try to, when we see that collective action is taking shape in a particular area, we will try to find the resources to do the diagnostics about what were the outcomes, what were the benefits through testimonials or whatever else, and then capture that in the platform so others can drive value from it.
But maybe the focus is not only on the outcomes, but really important information sometimes is on the process. With who we worked, what kind of difficulties we had, and how we managed to overcome these difficulties. And we give no sensitive or strategic information. We just explain how we managed to deal with such a situation and explain the process and maybe not the outcomes.
Yeah. And I think there will definitely be users of the hub that would be willing to be our guinea pigs there. And we can come up with a survey type of model and see if we can extrapolate lessons learned. There's actually some work that people may know of that's being led by, through their Water Futures partnership. In Stockholm, I believe they're going to release a report that talks about the first 3 years of the initiative and their growing and learning that came out of their collective action efforts. I think it's going to be a pretty useful document because many of the lessons about how companies can work collectively with NGOs and governments in different areas around the world, and what you can extrapolate when you try to put 7 or 8, 10, 12, 15 projects together will be very informative for people. And we'll look to import those learnings into the hub somehow, because we've been co-working with them on that, on good practice guidance on collective action. Because companies have realized they need to start working with other players to mitigate their water risk, but there isn't a lot of experience on how to do it effectively. So there's companies that realize the imperative, but don't have the practical, how do I do this in a way that doesn't waste time and that actually we benefit from.
Lots of companies working together, because this is something quite new. How can companies cooperate together? Usually they don't.
Yeah.
And so this is something very interesting. A new model of partnership working on common goal.
Yeah, the answer is yes. There are examples of companies that are in a particular area that are beginning to collaborate to solve water challenges. And I would say that's most pronounced in Southern Africa. It's starting to take shape a little bit in Eastern Africa, and to a lesser degree in India. This is a double-edged sword, though. I'll be very candid. So one of the concerns that we've heard, and we've done a lot of outreach to civil society groups on what do you think of this model, and whether it could be helpful. And there's this mixed emotion of, well, yes, it would be good to have some of these new players to the table because they can perhaps drive some of these improvements that we've been advocating for a long time and put some pressure on improved water management. But if what the platform ends up doing is a way that already influential players in our society have a platform to better coordinate their interests, and not with the inclusion of civil society and all the other players that are important for water governance decision making, that's a red flag. So what we've really tried to do is encourage in this platform the multi-stakeholder nature of it. That we de-emphasize what sector of society the organization come from. We focus on the action areas. We don't care if you're a company that wants to work on climate resilience and adaptation or an NGO. The point is you guys share an interest. The interest is climate resilience for this area. And if you downplay the organizational perspective and you upplay what you're trying to work toward, we think that even though organizations may have a lot of differences with one another on a range of issues, if there's one shared area that they do agree on, that's the beginning for collective action, right? Just focus on that. And maybe it's a handful of companies working together. I like it personally better when it's a handful of companies and some NGOs and some local government people working together. Looks like you have a follow-on.
The cost of this, how do you finance it?
Well, GIZ is one of the big supporters financially. All of the work of the Sea Water Mandate is covered through the annual contributions and project-based funding of the member companies. That's where it is right now. I think we've been in conversations with a number of development agencies that, besides GIZ, that see this as a very efficient way to potentially find co-investors for the infrastructure that they want to build. So are, I think, knock on wood, maybe will become sponsors of the platform so that they can focus in a particular geography, talk about their interests in terms of what they want to finance, and then have a quick mechanism to find other private sector players that may want to co-finance with them. And so I believe that's where future funding for this platform will likely come from. But, you know, there's no shortage of need, of course. So, you know, if everyone's writing checks here. Yes. 2 minutes. Yes, that's right. It was, if we had more than 3 minutes, everyone was about to break out their checkbooks.